Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This weird looking little knife right here is the Real Steel Real Slim. But first off, before I go any further, I want to thank Real Steel for sending this guy along. I actually reached out to them on this one. We've worked together before, but I said, hey, the Real Slim looks interesting. Can I take a look at it? They said, sure, of course. I told them, as always, though, I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. Might be a gem, might be junk. They still sent it along. Nonetheless, we do have to assume that this guy was the best quality controlled one of these ever, and I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature and quality of my review, but there you go. Next thing, let's do some size comparison real quick. This is a very strangely sized knife. In practice, it ends up feeling both relatively small and relatively big. In the handle, it's actually about the same size as a Delica, but the blade length is quite long. So here it is against the Delica, the Spyderco PM2 here. And then here it is against the Ontario Rat number 2. And then actually one other thing that's worth busting out here in terms of size comparison is the Real Steel Metamorph, as well as the Luna. In a true act of lunacy, I have brought this guy out. And so what we see here is that this is sort of a relatively compact knife in that way. But the thing that really makes it interesting is this dimension. This is a very, very thin knife. Put this guy up next to the Delica, and what we see here is that, holy crap, is this thing thin. Like blade stock-wise. This is thinner. It looks to be a little bit thinner than the Delica. Handle-wise, absolutely thin. This is a super, super thin, slim knife. And so that's useful. Next thing, the design on this guy. This is a Helmut Yerma design. I'm very sorry, Helmut. I'm sure I just butchered your name. But nonetheless, that's why this is seeming unlike anything else in Real Steel's lineup, frankly. And then this is available in a silver scale, as you see here, as well as a set of gold scales. Not like actual solid gold, but gold anodized to some variety or another. Then finally, this is not the factory edge from this knife. I have resharpened it, so don't blame them for any issues you see on the edge. Well, actually, I did a pretty good job this time. Hey, nice. But anyways, let's go on ahead and talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting knife. Start with on the good side. This is a weird knife, just in that the blade stock is so thin and the handle is so slim, but it ends up locking up just fine. We see here is, and this is actually a frame lock, right? This would be most people's liner lock, but it works, and it locks up quite securely, and there's no problem with it at all. It is a nice, easy lockup, and I appreciate very much the fact that they made this knife a locking knife rather than going the slip joint route or something else, as is often done, or the back lock route could have worked too, but as is often done with these kinds of very slim knives. Next thing, the blue accents on this, I think really do add something, right? They make it pop in a way. I think that this little bit here, this accent here, it's just nice. It's a little detail, but it's a good detail. Speaking of good details, check this out. This is the lock bar relief. They need to thin out the lock bar a little bit here so that it bends properly. And they've done that on the inside, leaving the outside very smooth, very sleek, that's just a nice little bit of design. Next thing, price on this guy, $50. Okay. No problem. I got no issue with that price at all. Anything higher, but no, $50, absolutely, they're good to go. No problem there. Next thing, this is super lightweight. I'll go ahead and put this on a scale here. It's dense because it's all metal, but it comes in at 1.99 ounces for... actually, I should measure the blade, and in order to do that, I need a ruler. And in order to have a ruler, I need to find the ruler. Here it is. So we're looking at 1.9 ounces for almost 3.5 inches of blade. Yeah, that's pretty slim, right? That is a very, very slim little knife here. So I appreciate that very much. And it is also very nice in the pocket. This thing is tiny in the pocket. It does stick up a little bit out of the pocket, which makes for a fold-over shirt pocket not necessarily ideal, but this is a knife that you could carry in a shirt pocket very plausibly, right? You could put this guy in a pack. You know, for instance, if you've got like a journal or something like that, this is a weird example, but I've got this Lockby journal on the table for review right now. This is one of relatively few pocket knives that would slip very nicely into this kind of a thing. Very, very uncommon to have a knife this slim in that way. I mean, this is very, very slim. I think that is a great thing, both for carry and overall. I mean, it's like Apple made a pocket knife, like Joni Ive, thinner, make it thinner. And this is the end result, except here it actually results in good function. So anyways, I appreciate very much how tiny this guy is, and the fact that this opens it up to carrying in a bunch of different ways that might not be available to a thicker pocket knife. So that's great. Then finally, on the good side, blade on this guy is very nice. In that it has a relatively thin, well, I'm sorry, it has an incredibly thin blade here. I mean, the blade stock on this is very thin, and the grind on it comes down pretty thin as well. If I hold this up here, see, it comes to a nice thin edge, and with a sharpening choil and everything like that, and a full flat grind too, this is a very, very slicey knife. With the VG10 blade steel here, as you can see right there, VG10 steel, thin stock, thin edge, this is just a slicing beast. This eats, closed cell foam with impunity, right? This goes through apples like a freaking lightsaber. Well, actually, it's not true, because then you'd have cooked apples at the end of it, but still, it's a very, very slim, thin, slicey knife, and I appreciate that very much. So to me, all that is the good. It's got a great thin blade, it's tiny in the pocket, very lightweight, good price, internal lock bar relief, and the blue accents are both nice design touches. And it has a very secure lockup, even though there's being as thin and light as it is. On the great side to me, honestly, the blade could be it, but to me, the thing that is great about this knife is that it is a specialist, right? This is a knife that is relatively purpose-built. This is not the same knife I'm going to send to everybody. In fact, I don't know. There is a subset of people who will want this. Somebody who wants something very, very slicey. Somebody who wants something very, very thin for whatever reason. Like I said, the journal case, I think, is real. Not like everybody's going to be needing a knife in their journal. But at the same time, if you're trying to find something that you can just slip into your pack and just have a very slicey knife, this is a really nice candidate for it. This is a knife that is not for everybody. So many of even from Real Steel, so many of the new releases feel like they just designed something that should work for everybody. It's everybody's new EDC. This is not that. Instead, this knife is purpose-built. It is a specialist. It is for somebody. And I'm sure that if you're watching, tell you what, if you're watching this video and you're thinking, oh my God, I need that for a specific reason, tell me what it is in the comments. But specialists are a joy. They are the antidote to blasé hotel artwork sorts of new releases, and I love seeing them here. So I appreciate the fact that Real Steel went all out, and they made a knife that is very unique, and that might not be everybody's cup of tea, but is going to be really super appealing to a certain group of people. So I appreciate very much that they made a specialist here. On the bad side, the downside, of course, to that is that it is going to be not necessarily ideal for some groups of folks, right? For instance, if you wear very big, bulky gloves, I can see the fact that this is relatively short, thin, meaning that this is going to want to rotate in the hand. It's not going to necessarily be ideal for something like that. It's also not a pry tool. You should never use a knife as a pry tool, generally speaking, but, this is not exactly a wilderness batoning sort of blade, is it? That's fine, though. Next thing, VG10. The VG10 steel is sort of in that range between barely adequate and barely inadequate. I don't love it. $50, okay. I'm not complaining too much about it, but at the same time, that is definitely an area where not as much in love. It is a very slicing focused knife, and I kind of feel like I would have liked to see something a little bit nicer, like 14C28N, or even go up there, but at the same time, for the price, okay, whatever. And at least VG10 is very easy to sharpen and very easy to strop. So I'd kind of forgotten, honestly, I hadn't used VG10 for a while. It's kind of like, oh yeah, VG10, I remember. Strop. Anyways, whatever, not a big deal. Next thing, the one-handing this guy is very awkward. This is really a two-hand open knife. I mean, you can do it. So watch, what I have to do, at least with my hands, is I have to grab this little area here with these two fingers, kind of put these in a pincer grip, keeping my hands, my fingers, that is, off the detent bar here, and then I can pop that out, and then I can use my thumb to open it the rest of the way up. And I can do it. And I imagine if you carry this every day for a year, you'll get good enough at it that you can do that well. But compared to some of the other knives, even in Real Steel's lineup, like this, one-handy, right? No freaking problem. So I appreciate, I'm sorry, I don't particularly appreciate the fact that this is kind of a one-hand open thing. I think they could have done the morphology of the hole here a little bit differently. The shape, I suppose, is the fancy term, such that it would be a little easier thumbed open, but whatever, not a big deal. Maybe you could flick it. I sure can't, but maybe somebody could. I don't know. It has a relatively strong detent, which is part of the reason for that. Next thing, this does have a tendency to rotate a little bit in the hand. Anytime that you have, look, a common mistake made by relatively new knife makers, and I'm not saying this is the mistake being made here, but a common mistake is actually to make your knife with a relatively cylindrical handle. I'll use this bottle of, eyeglass cleaner as a demonstration. But, what you do here, this is not an endorsement, of course, but the thing is, when you do something like this, this, it's very easy for the knife to rotate in your grip as you're trying to use it, as you're putting various forces onto that. When you end up with something that is relatively a short handle and is relatively thin, you can index okay, but this still has a tendency, at least for me, that these three fingers, when I kind of bear down on it, end up pushing this guy off angle, off axis a little bit, and so the knife carries, or I'm sorry, not carries, it ends up using with a little bit of this kind of an angle there. And if I grip more carefully, like I can kind of get it in the right angle, but it's not the intuitive one. And naturally, I kind of want to be off axis. I want to hold it like this, and that's not exactly how I want it to go. This isn't terrible, and the ergos I wouldn't say are bad. They're just a little weird, right? And again, if I carried this every day, I'd probably get better at orienting it properly and gripping a lot more with my thumb and finger, rather than letting these three do anything. But it does have a tendency to rotate a little bit. That's the downside to having a knife that's very narrow on this direction or very cylindrical, right? And then finally on the bad side, this guy came pretty dull, right? And it came with kind of a very obtuse angle of the edge there. That's not to say it's a thick edge, but just the V angle at the end, the sharpening job was relatively obtuse. So, and it got got even duller with use because, VG10, right? So I had to sharpen it back up again. Once I did it, it was fine, but I would like to see it come a little bit sharper from the factory because honestly, this is a slicing beast, right? What you want from this is like a folding scalpel, basically, and the fact that it didn't come super, I don't know, not super impressed there. So to me, at least that's the bad, is that it came a little dull. It had the tendency to go off axis in my hand as I'm kind of gripping it more carefully. One hand opening is awkward. VG10 isn't amazing, but $50, whatever, and it is not a super hard use knife, but it's not meant to be. On the ugly front, nothing ugly here, so let's go to the final conclusion, which is that this is an odd knife, but it's one I find pretty compelling. It's got a nice lockup, nice accents, a fair price, a nice weight and size, a thin blade, and most importantly, a very strong sense of purpose. This is a knife for very specific uses, and it's going to be the best knife, I think, for some of those uses, right? It's not a pry tool. I don't think VG10 knocks anybody's socks off these days, and I wouldn't mind seeing a reissue of this, and I don't know, something a little bit more fancy. One-handing is a little awkward for it. The ergos are a little odd, and it came kind of dull. Ultimately, my feeling on this is sort of, it's a little weird in that my general feeling is like, good, I'm glad they did this. This is not a knife that's for everybody, and frankly, I don't know that it's a knife for me. I've got lots of other slicey beast knives in my life, for instance, TRM Neutron 2 here. But still, so it's not like I'm lacking in this particular genre, but at the same time, a $50 slicing beast is a good thing. It's not a knife for everybody. It may not even be a knife for you, but it's a great knife for some people with some specific needs. It is a great knife to keep in a pack for deep, thin slicing. It's a great knife as a slicey backup if you're carrying something that's more of a sharp and pry bar. It's a great specialist piece for apples, hard shell foam, and other areas where thin stock is absolutely king. And for people with very specific needs, this could be a stellar choice. So in that end, if you have that very specific set of needs, I would say this is a gem. I'm a little biased against VG10. I'm going to be real with you here, but at the same time, I think this could be a really compelling choice if that is a specific set of needs that you have. And regardless of that, I will always advocate for companies doing something different, something a little unusual. Maybe it's a different design, maybe it's a different functional kind of set of tools, but I love seeing this, and I would rather have 20 of these knives that are a little odd, a little unusual, maybe aren't going to be for everybody, rather than seeing 20 knives that are all trying to do the same thing and ultimately not really blowing up anybody's skirt, so to speak, in the process of that. So I love seeing the specials. I love seeing something new and unusual. And in a world of same, this guy absolutely stands out. And I think it's in an area where the pickings, are a lot more slim. So anyways, there you go. I hope this has been interesting to you, that you will not begrudge me the bad pun at the end there, because yeah, real slim is a little... The chances of my doing better than that on camera were real slim. There we go. Okay, I can end the video now. Hope this has been interesting to you, and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.